In today's video, we're going to be looking at the anatomy of page layout and looking at editorial layout terms and conventions. This is so that you can identify those terms and conventions that are used in editorial layout, identify the grid system and apply it to your own work. Now, why is it important to learn editorial terminology? It's really quite simple. Editorial design is a massive industry for designers and illustrators, and because of the turnover of people, it's usually the first point of entry into the industry. Now, if you turn up at a publisher's or a design agency and you don't know these basic terms, you're going to look like an amateur. So it's important that you learn them and you get to know what the conventions are. It doesn't matter whether you're interested in business editorial, fashion editorial, or architectural editorial. These terms and conventions are going to apply across the board. The only thing you might run into is American terminology and British terminology, but most of them mix together anyway, so you should be able to get yourself by with what you're going to learn today. Now, these are the basics, and there's more you can learn, and I'll put a link at the end of the video. So let's have a look at the anatomy of a page. This is a layout taken from the Guardian Weekend Supplement. It's like any other supplement you'd find in a weekend newspaper. It's got all of the elements that we need for this session. First off, we've got the folio, and the folio is almost like furniture in a magazine. It appears throughout the magazine, and it's usually there for things like section headers, page numbers, and dates. And you'll see that throughout the magazine. It almost creates a style for the magazine. It's a signpost for the reader to look through. Now, the next element that we're going to look at is the thing that we all kind of know about, really, and that's the headline. Now, the job of the headline is simply there to catch your attention. It doesn't even really need to relate to what the article's about. It's simply there to get your attention, because the next thing we're going to look at is the stand first or the cells. Now, it's called the cells, S-E-L-L-S, for a reason. It's almost the hardest working part of the element of the page, and it's there to sell you what the article's about. It's going to entice you to read. Now, the next thing that comes in the list of things that we're going to look at is the deck text or intro text. Now, it's those three elements together. The deck text is usually the first paragraph that's bolded out. So you've got the headline, you've got the cells, and you've got the deck text. And those three things work together to seduce you into reading the rest of the article. It's there to say this is worth reading. Now, after the deck text is the copy or the body copy. Now, this is the writing that you see throughout the magazine. It tends to be no bigger than a 10-point font. So a lot of amateurish kind of like beginners will put a 12-point font because that's what we've got used to with a default in Word. But if you look through a magazine, the font size is really quite small, and 10, 11 points you would be rare to see in body copy. Next in this layout, we've got a quote that's been taken out of the main copy and placed over the photograph. And that's known as a pull quote because it's been pulled out of the copy and put onto the page. Lastly, we've got the credits. And that's a little tiny writing that appears under the photographs and illustrations and credits the writer, or it credits the photographer, or it credits the illustrator. Now, these terms are kind of they're not quite universal, but they're used throughout the editorial and publishing scene. So we're going to look at a fashion magazine next, just to see if we can identify these elements again. So for this magazine, straight away, we've got Gossip Girl as a headline. Next, we've got the stand first or the cells. Then we've got the deck text, which introduces us to the article. Then we've got the body copy. And next on this layout, we've got the CVI, and that's known as the Centre of Visual Interest. Now, this could be a photograph. In this case, it's a graphic, but it's something that's kind of breaks up some of the text and it pulls your attention towards that part of the page. Again, we've got a pull quote with the image. We've got the folio. So in this case, it's actually a date. It's got the month and the year. And then we've got the credits, and the credits have been made a bit more prominent in this image. So as you can see, it works throughout. It doesn't matter what sort of industry specialism the editorial's for. These things are going to help you out wherever you are in your career. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is the grid. Why use the grid system? Imagine that you've received this copy It's the writer has sent you directly the copy that you're going to need to put into the page. Who wants to read that? Can you imagine a magazine full of just text and text and text? The whole point of a grid system is for you to organise your form and your content. It's going to make it easier to read. It's going to organise the information, it creates space and hierarchy, and it creates visual coherence so that the whole thing looks like it's from the same publication. So it creates kind of a style for the magazine, some guidelines for the designer to work to, and a style that's going to meet the audience, the target audience expectations. Now there's lots of options for grids. There's almost a myriad of There's also almost a myriad of patterns that you could go for different copy and image and the way that it's laid out in this grid. But what we've got throughout these are columns and rows. And really, we're setting up our document in columns. There's loads of options that we can go for. And we're going to look at some example publications and look at how their columns are laid out. So here we've got the Guardian newspaper, and they're using 5 columns. You can count them across, 5 columns of text. Now it's a newspaper, so it's really heavy on the writing, on the copy. So by putting it into columns, it makes it easier to read. It helps you space out the writing. And then with the images that are placed into the layout, it helps you to break up the boredom and the monotony of reading. Next, we've got a gossip magazine, and this magazine is using a 3-column layout, and then they've also placed an image directly in the center and wrapped the text around the image. But you can see here, these are multiple 3-column layouts that you could use. Once you kind of get your head around looking at layouts and identifying the columns that are being used, it makes your life loads easier. So let's have a look at some grid options. I personally like to go for an even number of grids. So 2, 4, 6, 8, that kind of thing. I like to go for even because it gives me some options. We can start off with 4 columns of body copy, or we could go for 2 wider columns of copy. One could be an image, one could be copy. The next would be a larger area with a small column of text. So that could be an image and text. We could have half the page as an image with 2 columns of text underneath, or we could go for a large image with 4 columns of text underneath. Having an idea, at least having a structure, is going to help you lay out your copy and make your designs interesting and give you kind of a hierarchy to look at. And we're going to look at hierarchy in a video later. Now, the aim of this video today was to introduce you to the terms and conventions of page layout, for you to identify the grid system in editorial layout, and to enable you to apply these to your own work. Now that's the bit I can't do. You need to apply this to your own designs. Look at how you're structuring your page. How many columns could you use? The amount of columns that you use will depend on how much copy you've got and how big you want your images to be and what the overall look is. But what you've got to remember is it's all about your audience. What's your audience going to find easy to read? What's your audience expecting from this style of magazine? If you were going to be doing a skateboard magazine, then the layout is going to be different to something that you would find in something like the Financial Times. So know your audience, know your terminology, and know your grids. Until next time, happy designing.